All right. So today we're going to be talking about how JavaScript can interact with an external API using asynchronous code. Now, I think I may have talked about this once very early on when we were doing Def Grandma. When I talk about asynchronous code, that implies that there is a synchronous code. What is synchronous JavaScript?
Something that's doing step by step, waiting for each to evaluate or something.
Exactly. So code that runs step by step, waiting for each thing to resolve. So if I do console.log first thing, console.log second thing, and node script.js, console.log's in that order because it's going step by step. First thing, second thing, so on and so forth. However, sometimes code can't be synchronous, especially when we're dealing with the internet. Because if I, for example, I go to maps.google.com, and if I, move around like this, do I want the web page to refresh every time I change location? No, I don't. But I also don't want it to freeze every time I change location as well. So like I should be able to type in something here, autocomplete keeps going, but I can also still do this while it's happening. That's thanks to asynchronous JavaScript. So it's code that's like the code runs, but other code can still run before it's done resolving. So every time you tweet something and the page doesn't refresh entirely, that's asynchronous JavaScript. Every time Facebook automatically uploads new posts to your feed without refreshing the page, that's asynchronous requests. So we're going to be doing this using something that's relatively new called JavaScript, new to JavaScript, called the Fetch API. Fine, whatever. In the past, we had to use something called jQuery, and jQuery is still around. You'll probably run into it. If you see a $sign followed by the word this, that's jQuery. It's worth looking into because you'll find legacy code that still uses it. But once Java ES6 introduced Fetch, jQuery didn't really serve as much of a purpose anymore because we didn't need it to make what's these asynchronous JavaScript calls, which you also have seen called AJAX, is all the other word for asynchronous JavaScript calls. So Fetch, today we're going to be using it to make both GET requests and POST requests so that this website, this very good, well-designed website, can interact with the internet. So first off, I'm going to make a new div, and I'm going to give it a class called response data. And so anything I get from a JavaScript response, I want to put right here. Now I'm going to go to script.js, and I want to say when the page loads, I want to use fetch to make a GET request and return some JSON data. So I feel like I've been throwing around the word JSON a lot, but we haven't really talked about it. Who here has heard that phrase before, JSON? It's not the name. Cool. Jorge, what is JSON?
I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay. It stands for JavaScript Object Notation, yes. And so JSON is one of the most common ways that information is sent through the internet. So HTML is another very common one is XML. So while HTML is used to render a web page from a GET request, JSON is used to just send information over when we make an API call, for example. So if I want to see some JSON here, I can reddit.com/ I believe it's .json. So what we have here is Reddit's homepage formatted as JSON data. And what does this look like? Yeah, it looks like a JavaScript object. And it's formatted almost the same way. And we, so even though so we can interact with it all the same ways we can interact with a JavaScript object. quick note, even though it's called JavaScript Object Notation, JSON is language agnostic. It can be used with any language. It just happens to look like JavaScript. Also, the reason that it looks this nice is I have a browser extension called JSON Viewer. I recommend installing that on Chrome if you can, because otherwise it looks like this.
Yes.
So I want to be able to get some JSON data and render it on my page. I don't want to get the entire Reddit homepage. That's a little bit much. So I'm going to use a website called JSON Placeholder. So JSON Placeholder is a website that is just designed to allow you to make JSON requests just to test out to make sure you're doing it right. It's very, very nice. So the example here, they have a fetch request to an URL. So let's get a URL. If I go to JSON Placeholder.typecode/todos, see, I get a list of just, random objects with a user ID, an ID, a title, and whether or not it's completed. If I want just one of these in particular, I could type in its ID. So I do /1. It'll just give me this one object. So I want to get this information from this website onto my web page. So in order to do that, first off, I'm going to make sure that once I get that data, I'll have a place to put it, right? So I'm going to say, I'm going to make a constant. I'm going to call this response container. I'm going to say document.querySelector. And I'm going to be getting .response data. So before we move on to the actual fetch stuff, so what does querySelector do?
Finds a selector that matches your CSS selector.
Exactly. So querySelector is a document method that JavaScript has that just says, go through the DOM and give me the first thing that matches this. So I put .response data because I put something with a class. If I just put div, it would give me the very first div, for example. So there's many different ways to get things from the DOM. This is only one of them. And now I'm going to make my fetch request. So I'm going to say fetch, and then I'm going to give https:// JSON placeholder.typecode.com. So you notice I'm making the whole URL here. I've got the protocol, HTTPS. I've got the host, JSONplaceholder.typecode.com. And now I'm going to add the URI. Thank you. Oh, I forgot which one it was for a second. So I'm going to todos/1. So this is my endpoint. So let's maybe see what happens if I console.log fetch. What do we think we're going to get? A promise. Let's take a look at that. Console, thank you. Refresh the page. Actually, I didn't get anything. It doesn't look like it. Should be getting something, I thought, but maybe I have. Yeah, maybe it's not hidden or anything. Let's see if I preserve the log real quick. Okay, so nothing to do there. But Beck, you were right that the fetch returns was called a promise. So I'm going to, in order to look at that, I'm going to use a function called .then. And .then is going to take a anonymous function that takes the response of fetch, and we're going to do something with it. So I'm going to say, response, fed arrow, and in here I'm going to console.log response. Oh wait, I know what the problem was. Rookie mistake. /1. I'm going to put this back into a console.log. Do you understand what I did? I never linked this HTML document to my page. So split script src equals script.js. There we go. So now we have a promise. And it says the promise is pending. So any guesses on what this promise is for? Why do we have a promise? This isn't the data.
It's like promising that it'll get back to you, but you can still do other stuff.
Exactly. So JavaScript by default is synchronous. Everything runs one step after another. So in order to make sure that this HTTP request doesn't gum up the works, when you make a fetch request, it immediately returns something called a promise. You can think of the promise like a placeholder that says, all right, I returned something, and it's going to wait until that promise is resolved. Once that promise is resolved, then we can do things with it. So down here, if I do console.log, so it returns the promise immediately, and then it says waiting. So that's what happens when we make a fetch request. It just returns a promise. And it's up to us to do things with that promise. And in order to do something with that promise to get the data out of it, we need to make sure that something is ready to catch that data once the promise has resolved. And that's where .then comes in. So I'm going to stop console.logging this now, get rid of that. So .then can chain onto a fetch request and says, okay, once I have my response, I want to console.log response. Yes?
Let's see, response by itself have to be parentheses? And I just looked up something here.
It needs like two arguments. One is a response argument followed by a function.
Yeah. So I see .then and then response and then arrow function return response.json.
Well, I don't think necessarily that's the issue, because whenever you make a single line arrow function like this, so .then always takes a callback function. So I'm going to try something else real quick. So I'm going to parse this thing into JSON, or from JSON, I should say. And then I'm going to add another .then. You can just keep chaining these on. JSON, console.log, JSON. Interesting. Am I doing something wrong here? Got my fetch.
It's one argument, the path to the resource you want to fetch, and returns a promise containing the response or response function.
See, there's another way to do it. Async await function.
There is ways to do that, but this is not showing it's not working the way I think it is, which is weird. Because it was returning a promise, we knew that. I'm sorry, I don't, this is one of those things that I've done this a million times, and now all of a sudden it wants to be coy. Is it just taking a really long time to get to this placeholder data? I don't think so. Interesting.
And Google the fetching.
Is it because inside the fetch you have a double quote instead of single quote?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
Is it because inside the fetch you have a double quote instead of single quote?
I saw that too, but I didn't know if that mattered.
It's worth a shot. that's not it. I'm just going to console log. Weird. I'm going to Google this. So fetch dot then not running. That's been happening. Mean Girls.
That's
All right, this is not a. This is a little not a great. So React Native. That's React Native. I just want vanilla JavaScript.
Mozilla developer had just a quick like using fetch API thing when I just searched.
So fetch. So I could add a .catch if there is an error going on. I'm going to try doing then. Do it the old-fashioned way. Thanks for bearing with me, everybody. And I'm also going to add .catch, which is something we can add to do something if something has gone wrong. See if yeah, okay, so that's not it. Because I know feel like it's definitely correct the way I'm doing this.
yeah, it should be. You wanna open a new browser or something?
Yeah, might just open it in a new browser, see if that makes any difference. Make sure everything is saved.
I think it worked for me.
Yeah. So,
I
oops.
think when you linked the script file, I think you did it outside of body.
Outside of body?
Yeah, so when you, in your index HTML, I think you put it outside of body.
Yeah.
So you want to move it up one line.
Yeah, maybe. So. Console. Oh, okay, something happened there. Type error, failed to fetch. That's very useful, isn't it?
Something.
All right, so we are getting something's wrong with our HTTP request, I guess, because it's going into the .catch. If I do another console.log here saying error, failed to fetch. Okay, so that's more instructive. At least we tried to go here and it didn't work. So let's see if we can figure out why. Boop.
It's not because JSON placeholder isn't HTTPS, is it?
Oh, that would be annoying if it was.
It is HTTP.
Let's try taking out the S anyway. See if it's just. Also, this is going very slow. All right, why is it failing to fetch then?
I think it might be like something with this particular domain, because I tried a different resource. I think it worked better.
Yeah. Let's see what happens if I go to reddit.com/.json.
What if it's like documents?
All right, so
There's they have a course policy, so.
yeah.
Does it have anything to add? I'm just scratching. With the live server?
Maybe. Yeah. right, so I'm gonna Google the error because that's what we do. Type error failed to fetch. Yeah, there you can see some more information about.
Chicken slot. I sent another resource. Maybe. If you want to try that, because I think that.
All right, so we also have, okay, so we have this response right here. So let's see if putting in a different URL helps. Okay, this worked. Interesting. Yeah, I'm sorry about that again. I want to apologize again for that. I don't know why JSON placeholder was giving us so many issues, but now we should have, so I do in /employee/1. Oh, okay, that's interesting. So we got an error, we had a 404 not found. So that's, so it's not really a fetch API if this is how they're doing it. That's fine. I'm gonna stop preserving the log, make sure. Okay, now we're getting a 404 with this one, which is still more instructive than nothing. Okay, so that backslash at the end was causing us issues there. So we got a status 200, okay, true. We have a response because our .then worked the way it was supposed to. It took the response and console.logged it once the promise was resolved. I'm going to turn this back into an arrow function because that gives me more joy. And in this case, though, so my console.log response here. So everything's going to be eventually in the response.body, which is a readable stream. And it's got all this stuff here. And what we want is this right here. So here's the thing about HTTP, is when you make a request like this, it sends everything through as text. And we can't find, you know, employee one's salary or employee one's name very easily if it's just text, if it's just one long string. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that this is convert it from text into a data structure that we can use. So that's why I'm going to use resp.json. It's a method that will parse it from JSON text into a JavaScript object. So that, and I'm going to do another .then for JSON. This time I'm going to console.log the JSON. So we have a status, success, and then we have data, which is an array. And then data is an array of employee objects. So now that we have access to all of this, we can do whatever we want with it. So instead of console.logging it, I'm going to say something like response container dot inner HTML equals JSON. Let's see how it's structured. So JSON data 0, and we can just take a look at our information here. So we data 0 employee name. There it is, Tiger Nixon. Okay, thank you again for your patience on that part. All right, so kind of go over what happened now that we got through all the craziness. So we make a fetch request to this endpoint. Once the fetch request returns a promise. Once the promise is resolved, this .then triggers, takes that response and parses it into JSON, from JSON into an object so that we can interact with it. Then we have another dot then saying once that's been done, we're going to update the DOM with using the information we got. What questions do you have about how this has worked?
Was it just just an issue of servers talking or client to server?
Yeah, I'm still not entirely sure what was going on with that, because as you could see, we could visit the URL with our browser, and if I replace the code I had there with this, it should be okay. I'm going to try it one more time just to see if there's an example. See if we get another error that pops up. Yeah, there's that error that pops up every time. So I'm guessing that's something to do with the server-side response.
So if we ever hit that, employ that dot catch to kind of make sure it's failing.
Yeah, so yeah, the dot catch is there to say, okay, if we get back a bad response, we can actually like do something about it. Whether it's console.logging it or saying something went wrong to the user. So the dot catch only runs if we get a bad response. Okay, so now I'm going to try. We're going to try posting something. So to do that, we're going to need some kind of server that we can use to interact with and change, because JSON placeholder and REST API don't let us do that. But there's something called putsrec. Lets you record HTTP requests and fake responses like no other tool available. Try it now. Let's do it. So I'm going to hit create a puts request. So we've got a bucket name here. So they've got something here that says a response that they've kind of already done. So they have a variable called message, called hello world, if request.params.name, message equals hello plus request params.name, response.body equals message. So the response, so that's what that does. I'm going to change this a little bit. So it's going to be an object instead, and we're going to be doing some JSON parsing in if request.body and message data. So I can update, that should work. Let's see here. I'm also going to try to copy this URL, go to another page. Unless this wants to break on me too today. Uh-oh. It's a Heroku app, I should have known. Okay, well, I was able to get to it here. Okay, cool. So I've got my request here. So I'm going to go to HTML. I'm going to add a form to my document here. I'm going to get rid of this action. Just going to give it an ID equals comment form. Input type equals text. Give it an ID of comment. And we'll give it a name. Name. Then I'm going to put a button. The type of the button is going to be a submit button. Submit comment is the name of the title of the button. And then underneath this, I'm going to have another div for where we can put the response. Divid. Right, so if I refresh the page, I should see my form. There it is. So we can comment on Tiger Nixon, I suppose. If you want to. All right. So I'm going to say const form equals document dot. What's another way we can get the comment form? So we tried query selector once. What's another DOM manipulation method to get this particular form? Yeah, so get element by ID works because IDs always have to be unique, and this one's got the ID of comment form. And we're also going to get the response container, so, or post response container, let's call it that. Document.get element by ID. What was the ID I gave it? Post response with a dash. All right, so I'm going to add an event listener to the form. So form dot, oh, did I call it form? Yeah, form dot add event listener. The type of event is going to be a submit event. It's going to take a function that takes event as an argument. Oops. And I'm going to, what am I doing? It's not a fair error response. There we go. The first thing I want to do is I want to event.prevent default. What is the default that I'm trying to prevent here? Yeah, so a form will try to submit the data and it'll automatically refresh the page. So event.prevent default makes sure that the form won't refresh the page so we keep that from happening. And then we need to get the actual value of the comment that we type in. So, let comment equal. So actually, I want to try something real quick. I want to also console.log event. There we go. So event is trusted, true, type is submit, target form, current target. So from the event, we can get to the target of the event. And from the target of the event, we should be able to get to the elements, input, comment, value. I'm sorry?
That was buried.
Yeah. So there's a lot of ways to do it, but from event, we can get to what we want. So we could say, so we're going to format our, so we're going to say comment. It's going to equal, we're actually going to, we're going to say event.target.elements 0.value.
Would this be a great opportunity to destructure the JSON?
Destructure the JSON? Which JSON?
I'm sorry, just whatever element that's comment.
Yes. So this would be a good, so this will be a good place to put it, to kind of structure this so that we can put it in our response. But before we do that, I just want to make sure that we can get the comment out of the form. Once we have the comment out of the form, then we can structure it as a JSON response. Or,
I'm talking about like object destructuring with the ES6.
yeah, I'm not entirely sure if that would work or not. So you're probably right. I'm just not prepared to say whether it works or not, or work or not in this context. So in any case, I was able to get the comment from this form, put it right here. So now I'm going to say, I'll call this request data equal, I'm going to give this a name, and that name is going to be comment. All right, then I'm going to say let endpoint equal, that's the endpoint I'm going to. Now I'm going to make a fetch request to the endpoint. But because this is going to be a post request, instead of just giving it the URL, I'm also going to include other data for that, including headers and a body. So I'm going to say, so the headers and body is all part of a big object. I'm going to say the method is post. I'm going to make a sub thing here called headers. Headers. And we're going to tell it content type is going to be application/JSON. So we're telling, through the headers, we're saying, okay, expect some JSON data. And then I'm going to say the body is going to be, the body is going to be this right here, but I need to turn this into text so that it'll go through. So I'm going to use JSON.stringify. It's one of my favorite methods just because of the name. I'm going to stringify the request data. So this should be making a post request to this endpoint, hopefully. And then I'm going to, afterwards, I'm going to put a .then, just like we did with the GET request. And we're going to say ref. We're going to parse it using .json. And then hopefully, using that JSON data, we should be able to say, what did we call this variable? Post response container .inner HTML equals JSON.data. So let's see if this works. Put my name in. There it is. Hello, Noah Heinrich. So I wonder if it actually shows up here. So requests made, the number of requests made to this bucket have been 2. One was when I visited through here, and one was when I made that post request. So I made a post request. I gave it in the response body, I gave it this. The name is the comment, whatever the comment was. It makes a post request up here. And our response says, all right, we figure our message is data hello world. The body equals json.parse request.body. So it looks at our request, gets the body out of it, which in this case is just the comment. And then says, if there's a body, then we change this, this dictionary here, say hello plus that. And then it sends it back to us. Once it gets back to us, then we can put it up on our page like so. And if I put it in a different name, it keeps on updating it, so we can update this using online response without ever having to refresh our page or visit anywhere else ourselves. Really glad that worked the first time around this time. So whenever you making a GET request with fetch is very easy. You just say fetch this resource and then do stuff with it afterwards. When you make a post request or a put request or a delete request, you need to include this document, this dictionary here, this object here. JavaScript, it's object. This object here, which specifies the method, the headers, and the body. And then you can use .then to say, okay, once this is all resolved, what happens? What questions do you have about how this has all worked? Okay, I'm going to assume you are all masters of fetch then, in that case.
So in order to have questions, you have to understand it. But
Yeah, I just don't even know what to ask. So it's we try.
I think it all looks pretty complicated, right? Because, you know, fetch is so close to, let's say, to the bare language itself, right? Because it's a native library. But I know that, like, if you use other libraries like, let's say, Axios or, you know, whatever that may be, those are like a slightly more intuitive and user-friendly, right? So.
And I haven't used that particular one, so I couldn't tell you if it's more user-friendly, but yes, there are alternatives to fetch out there using external JavaScript libraries. But since fetch is native, I just figured this is an important one to know, and I think it'd be good. So we are going to expect you to use fetch at least for challenges for a little bit. But if you've used fetch and then you can confidently say you know how to use it, but you found one that works better, then go ahead and use that other one that works better. And I'm just saying, I would have killed for fetch when I was going through a thing because I had to use the jQuery and use the type out the word XML HTTP request every time. So this is honestly a huge improvement on what JavaScript used to do. Yes, we are. But again, if any part, I know this was a lot of information, so if at any point of it this is just not making sense at all, let me know. The main things to take away are with fetch with the endpoint, the URL you're trying to reach. Once you get a response back, you have this .then to do stuff with it. And since that comes back as just raw text, we need to parse it from JSON into a dictionary, an object, whatever. Once it's an object, then we can do whatever we want with it. So these two lines right here are going to be used a lot: fetch, URL, .then, response, response.json. And this just, posting is just a bit more complicated. I wonder if this website has a thing that says what kind of, can let us look at the response requests we get, because that'd be cool. Oh, nice. All right, so I think this is, all right, aha, here we go. So we can actually look at what actually happened. So when we made our fetch request, we made a post request. Here's the body of that post request. It just is a key with name, value of Noah Heinrich. And the headers, we have the origin, local site 8080, content type application JSON. So if we look at our own response here, the only headers we put was content type application JSON, and then fetch added on all this other stuff itself. All we need to say is, hey, expect some JSON data, because that's what we're sending up to you. And then it actually has the user agent, accept encoding, connection, content length, all of this stuff. And then there's the body. It parsed the body and made a response. And here's the response's data that it gave us. This is a really useful tool. Okay, great. Any other questions I can address right now before we break and then talk about your challenge for the day? Okay, cool. So let's see.